We have seen the number rise from about 300,000 kids to about 3 million kids using online learning. We have seen TV being used. So we repurposed our Parliament TV, which was used for education broadcasts.
Hi, and welcome to This Is What We Seek, a conversation with Project Rangeet. We equip teachers with a mobile app to deliver social, emotional, and ecological knowledge, or SEEK lessons, to primary and middle school children. In these conversations, we aim to explore how we can help children in this changing world. Managing self, our emotions and stress, coping with change, building resilience and gratitude, celebrating diversity in society instead of using our differences as weapons to tear us apart, learning how each of us can protect our ecology and act on climate. I'm Simran Mulchandani, and I will be your host. In today's episode, we have someone really special. We meet Anir Chowdhury. We wanted to learn more about how the pandemic is impacting learning. We're hearing that learning is becoming less equitable. We wanted a deeper understanding of what this means and what it means for future generations. We reached out to Anir so that he could share what enlightened policy should look like so that we can combat these dangers and build better forward. Anir Chowdhury, it is an honor to host you. You are policy advisor to the Aspire to Innovate program of the Cabinet Division of the Government of Bangladesh. This program is supported by the United Nations Development Program, or UNDP. You run an innovation fund which works for the good of society through massive cross-sectoral technology deployment. It's a big mouthful, and I'm sure you're going to tell us all about it. I'm also fortunate to count you as one of my dearest friends. We grew up together at Brown University in the US, studying computer science, and I'm so excited to interview you today. Anir, please tell us about the Aspire to Innovate program, or the A2I program, how you launched it. I recall an inspiring story in there that took courage, foresight, and quick thinking. Anir, please tell us more.
Simran, thank you. It's always exciting to be with you. And we're talking about something that's dear to both of our hearts, education. And education in the time of the pandemic. But let me go back maybe about 14 years when A2I started and how it all came together. Bangladesh was coined as a basket case of the world in the 70s by Henry Kissinger after the country's birth in 1971. And since then, we've come a long way. I mean, the world wrote us off in the 70s and the 80s, but now we are doing well in terms of food security. We're doing well in terms of per capita income, rivaling some of our regional neighbors as well. In 2008, our Prime Minister made a clarion call to build a digital economy by 2021, which is our 50th anniversary of our country's birth. That's 2021, so this year. So it's a special year for the country.
Yeah.
So when this was made in 2008, this declaration to build a digital economy, it was seen as a ridiculous thing, laughable. Country with no food security, $650 of per capita income, healthcare in shambles, all of that. So this was not a believable story at that time. But it was, we looked at this quote by George Bernard Shaw that I will actually cite. He said that a reasonable man tries to adapt himself to the world, and an unreasonable man tries to adapt the world to himself. So all progress depends on the unreasonable man. So essentially, that's what the story was. So we became unreasonable, and we said that digital economy, focusing on digital processes within the government and in the private sector, that includes education, agriculture, healthcare, law and order, disaster management, things that are crucial to a country's life. So that unreasonableness gave us momentum to build the country socioeconomically, but also the socioeconomic progress gave impetus to the digital progress. So it actually became a hand-in-glove combination. I'll tell you a story from my first workshop in the early days. It was a workshop with senior government officials, very senior government officials, about 16 of them. And I asked them what their expectations were from the workshop, about how we would use digital tools and processes in different ministries. So agriculture, education, and what have you. The person who was the senior most from the agriculture ministry said that it doesn't apply to me. It's a complete waste of my time for 5 days. But since your ministry called me, A2I was incubated in the Prime Minister's office for 11 years. That's right. So since Prime Minister's office called me, obviously, I cannot say no. So I came, but don't bother me. I will just read my newspapers online, but I will not listen to you. So on the 5th day, I again went around the room and asked, what did we do? How did we do it? And the 15 gentlemen and ladies, they actually said good things. So with trepidation, I went to this last gentleman because I expected that he would just sort of blast me out and then say that okay, it was total BS. But he said that I've been in the government for 30 years. And this was probably the most important, effective workshop because we explored what we were doing wrong. And for the first time, I saw a bird's eye view of service delivery from the point of a poor, marginalized widow applying for a social safety net and how that gets processed within the government and how we ignore the perspective, the reality of that woman, and we go about in our own merry way and not understand that reality. So that bird's eye view really showed me what really happens within the government. Because before, it was not clear to me. Because I would just look at a file, I would sign off on it and would send it to the next person. But that bird's eye view really helped me. So in that instant, I had just come back from the US after doing my studies and then 13 years of entrepreneurship story that you know well.
Yeah.
So that really told me that you can change minds within the government. Yeah. And somebody as senior as he was, with one stroke of a pen, he could change the lives of millions of farmers.
Right.
So that's what gave me courage and inspiration that change is possible within bureaucracy, which is really typically seen as unchangeable mountains, right?
Yeah.
So that's how A2I started. I was inspired. I learned more from A2I than I'd ever done in any other endeavor in my life.
Wow.
And we have seen dividends. We've seen dividends. Now the per capita income has almost quadrupled in the last 13 years. We have set up thousands of what are called digital centers in rural areas. And we have delivered about 567 million services in the last 10, 12 years, saving citizens about $8 billion. So it's a story of transformation. And one would not expect it from an impoverished country like Bangladesh, which is still a least developed country, an LDC.
Yeah.
We're on our path to graduation, but I think digital stories are a part and parcel of our socioeconomic progress right now.
Anir, that is so inspiring. It is a story of foresight on your part and humility on the part of that senior minister. You studied how technology could change lives and use it to transform processes in a way that really mattered to the people. And the minister had the humility to be shown a better way of doing things and serving his people better. Finally, that's what government's about, right? To serve citizens of its country and not themselves. So it took humility, courage, and foresight. And there are probably so many more stories like this from Bangladesh that have propelled the country's growth. Well done. So Anir, I move on to this. You and I, we went to a very prestigious university. After college, many of our friends went on to, investment banking, management consulting. Some became lawyers, doctors. And I really am not trying to embarrass you here because I know how reticent you are in this respect. most people who knew you at college would peg you as one of the smartest people they knew. You chose a life of service, and many in your circles associate you with the marvelous growth that you just spoke about. I'm sure you'll point at teams, and that's absolutely right. But we somehow, somewhere in there, we all believe you played a part. And that growth has often outpaced India. And that's becoming interesting. That's becoming the talking point. Tell us about the highs and lows of your job and why you make the sacrifices you make every day.
Interesting questions, Imran. I think it's really all about opportunity cost. So for high achievers in prestigious universities, the opportunity cost is measured by wealth creation for oneself and the companies they represent or they start or build. And I was on that same path, doing startups in the East Coast, Boston, New York, and DC. And it was an exciting journey in the late 90s, early 2000s. But I met the founder of Grameen Bank, Professor Yunus, read a book that he wrote, Banker to the Poor. It's these small things that sometimes influence you in ways that you cannot really imagine. There was a line in that book. I won't go into the details of that book, but this one line where he said, I owed it to myself. Where he talks about how he went back to Bangladesh after the Liberation War in 1971 and from his flourishing career in the US, because he owed it to himself. So I felt that my opportunity cost was not to build wealth for myself, but figure out how I could be useful to the nation. At a time where the nation was trying to figure out a new name for itself, a new image for itself, not the impoverished nation that is associated with floods and droughts and political instability and many other types of man-made and natural disasters. So it was at a time I decided to go back, and my first focus was going to be education. So focusing on using digital tools, which was my background in the US, using digital tools to improve education in high school and primary school. My mother was a teacher.
That's right.
She had just retired from her university career, teaching math for 35 years. So we thought that we would actually build a small NGO together. That's what attracted me to go back, focus on education. But I realized that doing it from outside the government with an NGO, I did a calculation. I spent some time and did a calculation, and it told me that I would need about 200 years to make the impact that I would make. And that's when this opportunity at the Prime Minister's office to build a digital program, which would include education, but I was offered to not include education only, but other things as well. And I had to take that, although my heart was in education. But I'm glad that I took that offer because it allowed me to understand and learn about the governance process. A colleague of mine at one point said the problem of education in our developing countries is not the problem of education. It's really about the problem of governance. And that's what I learned over the years. And so the policy changes that have happened where I was associated with really taught me that it's the educator's mindset that you have to change. It's the education administrator's mindset that you have to change. It's the education policy that you have to change, infrastructure that you have to change. It's not the teaching learning process per se. That is important, but it's really all the other associated things that you have to change. And I was able to play a small role in that. It's been a roller coaster journey. I won't lie. Every day is a day of frustration because things don't move within the government, right? It's bureaucracy, it has rules, archaic rules. But at the end of the month, I see that some things have moved because I've tried many things in the past, and things that I've tried that I sowed the seed for maybe months ago, starting to bear fruit. So end of the month, I feel a little okay. I mean, the days of frustration dissipate. And the end of the year, looking back, I think is magnificent because we see that when we look back, each year we move mountains. And in education, I'll talk about the education story, what we have done, but it's been remarkable. It's been a remarkable journey of learning, failures and successes, learning from failures more than learning from successes. So it's been an incredible 14 years or so.
That's fantastic, Anir. And I think as I was listening to you, and I related back to my question, what strikes me is, people set out from college to, make a change for themselves or for the company they were working for. You took on this, gigantic role of making change in a country you love. And that patriotism is truly remarkable. I'm going to now just switch gears for a second and situate us in today. Right? You have often spoken to me about the deepening education inequalities facing us, particularly owing to the pandemic. Can you please recount what these are, especially, and talk to us about how we should be building better forward?
Sure, Suman. So let me talk about three things, very, very important things. One is the learning loss. A third grader in 2019 went into the fourth grade in 2020, had maybe a couple of months of schooling, and then school stopped. In Bangladesh, schools have been closed since the March of 2020, so almost a year and a half. And this particular boy, let's call him Arif, was promoted to fifth grade at the end of 2020 without learning anything in the fourth grade and taking any exams. So a third grader in 2019 became a fifth grader in 2021 as is not going to school. So the learning loss, I'm not even going to talk about the loss of gain, right? So there is no gain. And what he learned in 2019 is gone, right? But he is in grade 5, according to the schooling system, education system. What does that really mean? What is, when the schools open up, we don't even know when they will open up. I mean, we're going through series of lockdowns with the different variants as they come in. So what does this mean for him as a learner? What does this mean for him as a contributor in society? Shocking, I think, revelations will come when schools open up.
Yeah.
Second is the rise in child labor. So 1% rise in poverty leads to about 0.7% increase in child labor. And poverty has increased. We don't know the exact numbers because pandemic has driven people to new sorts of poverty, lost wages, daily wages, especially rickshawalas, street hawkers, and so on and so forth. Right? So child labor has increased massively. Third is child marriage. So loss of schooling actually leads to increase in child marriages. Child marriage was already a big problem in Bangladesh and it will become a huge problem. So there are studies which show that child marriage has increased by 13%. Again, because of pandemic, we don't have deep data, but just shallow studies that have been done. So the loss of learning, we're talking about a lost generation almost. The increase in child labor because they're available. They're not going to school. The children are not going to school. They can come to different types of street shops. They can come to households for house help. And the increase in child marriages. So this is a catastrophic outcome of school closures for such an extended period of time. Yeah. And we have tried different things. We have tried online education. So internet, for instance. We have seen the number of kids that we have this portal called Connect, which is focused on adolescent learning. We have seen the number rise from about 300,000 kids to about 3 million kids using online learning. We have seen TV being used. So we repurposed our Parliament TV, which was used for education broadcasts throughout the pandemic time periods. All different echelons of education, primary, secondary, vocational, madrasa, have used this as a way to disseminate educational programs. But internet probably has reached maybe 10 to 20% of our kids. TV may have reached about maybe 50% of our kids at best. We don't know. So these are successes, things that we have tried, but also these are failures. I mean, going forward, what does this really mean? Yeah. So it really means that we have to blend the digital part into our physical part of education, right? So even when school closed, schools are closed. So we had a workshop very recently where there were examples of how teachers have actually followed up on students over mobile phone and also small gathering in their homes and in their sort of yards so that they can maintain social distancing. So new forms of, I think, imparting educational content is coming up, which actually go back to the hundreds of years ago in the Indian subcontinent, right? The tolls and the I don't know what the English word for it is. I mean, we used to call them patshala. So where the teacher would actually sit in front of students under a tree. Tagore also promoted this in Shantiniketan.
Right.
Also, right? I mean, that's the kind of, I think, environment that we're talking about that we can see as alternatives.
So what you're talking about is a much more personalized form of education, kind of like in hunter-gatherer times, as opposed to the rote, cookie-cutter, industrial learning system we have today.
Right. So we go back in a humble way, as you harped on
Absolutely.
humility, in a humble way, and then bring back those realities, because that's the reality we face today. But also use educational devices as they become cheaper and data costs become, I think, more affordable, and digital becomes more ubiquitous. So it's a combination of what we call the high tech, such as the internet, social media, artificial intelligence in our education system, making things more personalized. So that's one way of looking at it.
Yeah.
The low tech, which is in the hands of majority of our students, TV, radio, mobile phones, not the smartphones, but the feature phones. And the no tech, so the high tech, low tech, and the no tech. No tech means educational material is being distributed to students. But when pandemic is over, if there is such a thing, but when schools open, when schools reopen, I should say, we want to have a combination of the physical, different types of innovative physical modes of learning, maybe not in the classroom where 40 students, 50 students are sort of cooped up together, but maybe in open area. So sort of an open learning in the physical space, and also supported by digital devices over time, and supported by parents who have taken on new role as guides, even when the parents are not educated, not even literate. There is this famous experiment by Professor Sugata Mitra from the UK, Newcastle University. He says the method of the grandmother. So where the grandmothers just listen to what kids are learning about, they have no idea about what they're learning, but they just ask questions. So what did you learn today? Explain it to me. They encourage, they inspire without knowing anything about the subject matter. So that inspiration, if the parents can be taught to be inspirers of education, the process, without learning math or languages or science or anything else, that also can actually play a big role. So it's the new paradigm of different roles that teachers, parents, caregivers, students themselves. There is a story that I know, a fourth grader who became an education leader. He was completely uninterested in education before. And when the pandemic came, he became very interested in going online, learning about things. He formed a WhatsApp group. And now he follows up in the WhatsApp group of students as the education leader, and make sure that all his friends in that group actually submit their assignments online, and so on and so forth. So there are different types of, I think it's a complete new paradigm shift, where I think we have to take into cognizance about the different roles that are emerging, the personalized learning that we need to think about, the role that a student may play as an education leader, the role that a parent may play as an education guide. So these are all things that we need to bring into our policy discourse. And that's exactly what we're trying to do in Bangladesh, learning from the different experiments and failures that we've had in the last year and a half. So our education policy is now changing into what is now known as a blended education policy. So see how all these different paradigms and processes can blend into a new educational reality.
Right. And I guess a lot of this is about, and I'm going to say it again, it's about just realizing that there is just so little in our control at this point. The pandemic has actually just handed it to us, that there is so little in our control. that we actually have no choice but to be more open, but to listen, but to learn, but to be more adapting. And therefore, maybe the thing we've learned, which hopefully we pass on to our children, as opposed to bringing them back to school and saying, here you go, have some more math, have some more English, have some more science. Maybe the biggest gift of COVID will be that we all learn that there's just so little in our control, and show our children that, you know what, every day is a wonderful new day, and that we all are here to learn and grow with time as it goes.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think you hit it on the head, absolutely, that if we can learn from what COVID has really taught us and not go back to, I mean, there is this concept for months we talked about building back better. I don't think we want to go back.
No.
But we want to build forward better. And that's something
build forward better. Beginning. Yeah. Andreas Schleicher. Yeah. Andreas Schleicher. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what we need to be aware of and be inspired by the new possibilities.
Yeah. So this is actually a really inspiring. You know, we started off with, you know, your story of actually being open and, you know, your humility to contribute to your country as opposed to contributing, you know, to a company or to yourself. Hearing that clarion call from within yourself, acting on it. And today we find ourselves in post-pandemic world. And maybe that's exactly what all of us need to do. Listen to that voice in ourselves, listen to what's happening out there in the world, and build better forward. Anir, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much. You're a true patriot. You're a true son of Bangladesh and a wonderful friend. And thank you for doing this and being a part of the show.
Thanks, Herman. Always an inspiring discussion with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.